blew it. Elize, I think. Sorry, I know you tried to work with me. She's from the New Lawyers Division. She's going to come up, and afterwards will come up as Cynthia Jones. She's with the Ninth Judicial Historical Society. Uh, she's on the board. I'm actually an advisor member on that board. She's a past M3 president. Why you come up? Yeah.
Gotta bring it down a little shorter. It's gonna be hard to follow up. But hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Alize. I'm one of the board members of the King County Bar Association New Lawyers Division. On behalf of the NLD, we want to thank the M3 FBA for creating such a meaningful program for Black History Month, one that showcases the excellence in the legal teams behind our professional sports teams right here in Seattle. NLD is honored to co-sponsor this event, and we are grateful for this partnership. For those unfamiliar with the New Lawyer Division, we serve as a bridge for law students and attorneys within the first 10 years of their careers. We all know those early years can be full of trial or error, or if you're lucky, they can go smoothly. But either way, we want to be a constant and steady resource for networking, mentorship, and volunteer opportunities. This year alone, the NLD hosted multiple networking events, an after hours family law clinic, and a resume review slash interview prep session. These programs are only successful because of the engagement of our local community. So thank you. Before I close, I'm going to do a shameless plug for our upcoming event on April 9th. It is our spring soiree. This year, we're hosting it at the Art Love Salon. If you guys haven't been there, I hope to see you there. It's a very beautiful space where you're surrounded by art from local artists. At the spring soiree, we will announce this year's Mentor of the Year. We will host a silent auction, and it will be an opportunity for everyone to network with members of the legal community. Proceeds from the silent auction and sponsorship for this event will go towards the KCBA's pro bono programs. So, my last final and shameless plug, if you or your organization is interested in sponsoring the event or donating items, please feel free to reach out to me or the other members of the board that is in the back here today. Thank you and enjoy your program.
Up a little bit. Thanks, everyone. We'll get the program started. I just have about 60 seconds of an introduction. Again, I'm Cynthia. I'm from the Ninth Judicial Circuit Historical Society. For short, that's NJCHS. We have partnered with the court and the M3 FBA for several years now to come up with Black History Month programming, among other programming. If you're not familiar with the Historical Society, we cover the entire Ninth Circuit. We are very lucky to have today from San Francisco our executive director, Johanna Hartwig, and her colleague, who I like to call the communications guru, Georgia Johnson from NJCHS in LA. So we are really invested in preserving history, especially judicial history, and informing the public about the importance of an independent judiciary. And we also really support programs and create programs like today to keep this at the forefront of thinking. And before I close, I want to thank the M3 FBA, and particularly, I know there's been a shout out for Mo Hamoudi, our president this year. So thank you, Mo, for your partnership with NJCHS. It is the NJCHS and M3 FBA that is sponsoring and paying for your reception this afternoon from 4:30 to 5:30 in the jury assembly room. That will be catered by Lark Restaurant. And it's been a really wonderful partnership to have with the FBA. So thank you, Mo. And so without further ado, I just have one housekeeping item per Judge Jones's request, who's about to come up here. We are doing questions by 3x5 cards. So no worries for those of you online. This is a hybrid event, and we have many folks joining us on where you see the cameras. I am monitoring your questions on my phone, and I have index cards to write your questions. For the rest of you in the room, the NLD, New Lawyer Division of KCBA, are our 4 volunteers today. Raise your hand, they will bring you. They're in the back, they're raising their hands now. They will bring you an index card. If you indicate you have a question, they'll give you a pen. You can write it down. They'll bring it up to me. We'll get it to Judge Jones. So without further ado, I give you the incomparable Judge Richard Jones. Thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We are so excited about every single one of you who signed up and every one of you who's out in virtual land. We appreciate all of you coming here today to celebrate Black History Month with us. We had a brief conversation, and I was talking to Christian, and we were talking about just baseball. And I said, you know, when I was a young boy, my father used to always tell me about all these great Black baseball players. He was in Negro minor leagues. And he would tell me about all these players. The only one I remember from the many conversations was Satchel Paige. And I asked him, I said, Daddy, I said, how come we never see the Negro players on TV? Because that's when we were still Negroes before we got wise to the name that we properly should be addressed. And he said, I can't tell you, son. And that was always such a sad statement about how our history couldn't be shared because it wasn't in front of us. We just knew about it. Again, like Robert Flanaugh said, stories were passed down so we knew who was and what was part of our history. So thank you all for being here and sharing with us today. Now we got a couple no-fly zone rules for our panel. And I'll tell you what those no-fly zone rules are right now. One, we're not taking questions, as Cynthia said, because many times lawyers get in front of a microphone, they think it's an audition for filibustering, and it's not going to happen today. You can write it down. If you can't write it down, it's not going to get considered. Second, all of the panelists here today are speaking on their own individual behalf. They're not speaking for any one of these teams. Second, despite the fact that you may have seen things in the newspaper, there'll be no questions permitted about Major League Baseball and collective bargaining issues, period. There'll be no questions about the Seahawks and the potential sale. And there'll be no questions about individual player trades or coaching selections. Now, some of you are saying, well, what the hell are we doing here for? So anybody that wants to leave, please feel free to stand up and get out of here, but pay at the front door for taking up our time. So what we're going to do is we've got a lot of stuff to cover in 60 minutes. So I'm going to throw a few softball questions out at the beginning and then get into some more nitty gritty questions I think that you might want to know about us. So let's start first with, since you're closest to me, Sadie, if you and every one of you could give just a brief summary. I don't need to know your educational background experience, but just what specific pathway you had. In other words, what positions did you hold and what's your current position with your team?
Hey, y'all. My name is Sadie Houston. I am originally from Oklahoma, and I have to give you that context because I think a lot of my perspective is because I'm a small town country girl at heart. I do have to share also that I lead on panels as, you know, this is my perspective. I'm here to have a discussion. We're not necessarily here to talk about substantive matters. And so if I'm ever sharing anything with you, it's because it's coming from my experiences. With that being said, I'll answer your questions, Judge Jones. I went to the University of Oklahoma for undergrad. I was a product attorney after I graduated from Seattle University School of Law in 2020. That product attorney role was held at Zillow as essentially a mini general counsel for the rentals organization. And from there, I went straight into sports as associate general counsel for the Seattle Sounders and now Seattle Reign.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christian Halliburton. I'm currently the Deputy General Counsel and Senior Director for Government and External Affairs for the Seattle Mariners. I started my career here in Seattle at Perkins Coie. I wish I could say I was from a small town. I'm almost from nowhere. I moved around so much that when I finally landed in Seattle, I figured out that I finally kind of arrived at home. And so I've been centered here and really grounded here ever since. After practicing at Perkins, I went and did 2 years at the Federal District Court with Judge Barbara Jacobs Rothstein, left the clerkship and went to a small firm called Heller Ehrman that evaporated from existence. Had nothing to do with my time there, I'm sure. I left Heller actually relatively early because I joined the faculty at Seattle University School of Law, and I spent what I felt like was a very rewarding 20 years there. I took emeritus status a number of years ago. I had been getting involved in some interesting governance and kind of startup technology endeavors towards the end of my time at Seattle University, and I decided to leave the faculty and went in-house for a small technology firm. Did that for about 5 years before the company's focus on defense contracting signaled to me that maybe the mission had changed. And that's when I decided to find my next love. And I remember sitting around my table with my family saying, God, why can't I just find a job in baseball? I was a baseball coach at the time. I've always been a baseball player. We are a baseball family. About 9 months later, I found myself working for the Mariners. So I feel like it's another experience in finding my way home.
I don't know.
I apologize for that.
Christian's got that voice that sounds like he's on the radio announcing a baseball game. And that's a low ball.
That might be the next love.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Marissa John. I'm from the opposite of Sadie, a big city of New York. Born and raised there. I lived on the East Coast my entire life. I started my career in New York in real estate finance at Alston and Bird. Did that for a few years and decided that I wanted to expand my practice area in real estate at the time. And went down to Orlando to Baker and Hostetler to do real estate development. Did that for a few years, and it was at Baker that I realized that stadiums are a big piece of real estate, and was able to spark my interest in the merger of real estate, or that intersection of real estate and sports. And while doing that work, I was recruited by Amazon, primarily for my real estate background, and that brought me to Seattle. At the time, I thought, Jeff Bezos has, a lot of money. At some point, he might buy a team. Who knows what he's going to do? So I'll work with Amazon and see where that ends up. And that, again, brought me to Seattle. Was then recruited to work for the Seahawks and couldn't pass that up as my dream job. And now I serve as Vice President, General Counsel for the Super Bowl winning Seattle Seahawks.
Okay, before Haywan says anything, she gets the award for coming the longest distance to be here. She was caught up in a situation and circumstances in Mexico, and she didn't arrive back until 4 a.m. this morning. So round of applause, Haywan.
Thank you. Caught up in the circumstances makes it sound like I had something to do with it. I was in a resort and couldn't leave, but glad to be back here safely. I'm Haywan Teshoma. Since you mentioned Brooklyn and Oklahoma, I have to say I'm Seattle born and raised, but I lived away and started my career out on the East Coast in New York. I was more on the entertainment side of things initially, so I started at Hogan Lovells in their media practice group. And one of the first big projects I worked on was the acquisition of the Brooklyn Nets, the now Brooklyn Nets, and building the Barclays Arena. So that was kind of my first taste of exactly what I ended up doing 15 years later here in Seattle. I went from Hogan Lovells to, my family's from Ethiopia, so I moved abroad and was doing functionally startup and foreign investment work there for a period. And then moved back here in 2016 and was working at a local sports technology startup called Vices, which manufactures protective equipment, but mostly helmets, football helmets. And from there was recruited over to my position now, which is CLO and General Counsel of Climate Pledge Arena and the Seattle Kraken. We also have investments in our AHL team down in Coachella Valley and the arena there, as well as in Memorial Stadium here, which we're redeveloping in partnership with the Seattle Public School System and the City of Seattle.
Now you see what a great collection of individuals we have. And you're probably asking, well, how did you get all these people to come here? It was real simple. Cynthia Jones had talked to Christian, and they were talking about Black History Month. And then Cynthia calls me and says, Judge Jones, what can we do for Black History Month? I'm at the end of a trial day, so I said, she said, Christian's on board. So I called Haywan. And then Haywan, this is 2 or 3 minutes after I hung up with Cynthia, I called Haywan, and Haywan said, let me call Cynthia and let me call Marissa. So in about 7 or 8 minutes, we had a panel. Now, nobody else can do that. So don't ask me to put on a panel together, but you can see we got the best and the brightest of people. First of all, a lot of times people ask an in-house counsel for a sports team, what exactly do you do? What happens in your day-to-day life? So, Haywan, I'm gonna catch you because I know you might be tired. I'm gonna catch you sharp at the beginning.
Before I run out of steam. Uh-huh.
If you could share with us kind of like a day in the life, what kind of things you're responsible for in the daytime, just kind of an overbroad statement of what happens at Seattle Kraken when you were involved.
Yep. I mean, the best thing about my job, and I'm sure you all would say the same, is that there is no day in the life. It's funny when people ask what a general counsel for a sports team and an arena does. The first question they ask is about player contracts, which is not at all something that there are some GCs who handle player contracts, but typically that's handled more on the operations side, the hockey ops in my case, or football or baseball ops. Our assistant general manager happens to be a lawyer by training, which makes it very easy for him to be in charge of that. And it's mostly about managing salary, cap space, et cetera. So that what you've seen, on Entourage or Ballers or whatever, that is not what lawyers like us are doing on a day-to-day basis. So in addition to having 44 hockey games at the arena every year, we have about 150 additional events, concerts. The Seattle Storm are also a tenant of the arena. The PWHL, Professional Women's Hockey League team that was just launched this year. The Torrent also play in our building. We have NCAA tournaments, family events, WWE. There's all manner of things that happen in the building. And sports is a big part of that and the driving tenant of the building. But we also have to actually run the building itself. And we're right in the middle of Seattle Center, which is a busy campus. So my day could be anything from getting a call from a team member of mine about an injury that happened at an event last night. We had Cardi B on Sunday and another concert last night. We've got a Torrent game on Friday and, things happen. So it could be something that requires, let's say, pulling video footage. It could be talking about renewing our Ticketmaster agreement, which is a much bigger scale than, a little slip and fall. We also manage HR personnel issues. And I always tell people the thing that surprises me most about this job is how much we deal with feelings and the feelings of employees, the feelings of guests, the feelings of people who are related to our contract partners, our vendors, et cetera. So it really is. And I think the philosophy of the legal department and the way that we try to, my team and I try to run our aspect of the business is really taking the long view of everything. We have a 55-year ground lease for the building from the city of Seattle. And most of the relationships that we're entering into are going to outlive me and my tenure with the team. Same for the rest of my team. So really, we try to pick our battles wisely. We try to avoid litigation. We try to think of people as partners and our fans as guests. And I think having a legal team who's approaching the business from that perspective is, you'd be surprised what a difference it makes in how the rest of the business functions.
Haywan, how many people on your legal team?
Oh yeah, I know. I made it sound like it's a huge team, right? It's me plus 2, and then we have outside counsel, for all aspects of the business.
Anything special going on Saturday night?
On Saturday? You can't ask me that kind of. I don't know what day today is.
Celebrating
What's the-
Black History Month.
Oh, is Saturday? Is that Saturday or is there Black Hockey History Night? Okay, yeah. I know the time for what is it? It's February 27th. So I know.
It's this
See,
Saturday. Pretty
yeah,
soon.
no. Time is very elastic right now, Judge Jones.
Okay, Marissa, do you answer the same question?
I echo all of, I think she summarized it, excellently. Like we handle a lot of different issues, similarly to, oh, sorry. Similarly to Haywan, we have the Seahawks, which is one entity, and then we have First and Goal, which is the master operator of the stadium. We have the Sounders, the Rain, that also utilize that venue, as well as over 200 events. This year we have FIFA World Cup and 6 World Cup matches that will be done at Lumen Field. So we are extremely busy. And I will say, for the record, unfortunately, during that time of World Cup, we can't refer to it as Lumen Field. It would be Seattle Stadium, but you all really know what it is. And so on a day-to-day basis, I am dealing with, myriad of different issues. It depends on who comes into my office or who, is sending me an email. So it's kind of the situation where, our head of HR and I'm like, okay, Eric, HR. Okay, employment law, shoot. And then they'll ask a question and I have to kind of transition my brain from being able to at least be, knowledgeable enough to be able to say I can answer that question, or I need to kind of consult outside counsel to be able to get the answer. But it just, again, depends on the issue, the day, the time of the year. We just wound down from a successful Seahawks season. So we're rolling into concerts and events, and then as well as World Cup. So I'm now going to see more stadium side issues as opposed to focusing a lot on Seahawks. So a lot going on.
So I think what you'll hear this afternoon is there are actually a lot of similarities across our organizations, because the practice of sports law has some overlapping responsibilities and topics. The one thing that I think, Haywan, you flagged, it was striking to me how quickly I was able to recognize that I think one of the most valuable roles of an in-house counsel for a sports organization is when you recognize that you are actually a driver of the business. So we help try to facilitate our business outcomes while mitigating risk, right, at the highest level. Every day is different. We spend a lot of our time supporting our corporate partnerships department. We're responsible, what we call at the Mariners, the people and culture. So all of our HR functions. We are at our core really an IP business. If you think about it, we have tons and tons of data. We have tons and tons of IP that we manage from a licensing, like sort of a bidirectional licensing standpoint. We also have strong marketing teams that we support. We've got a lot of non-baseball events that take place in the stadium. We have an important relationship with the Public Facilities District. T-Mobile Park is owned by the people of King County, and so we manage that relationship. We are essentially a tenant, and the PFD is our landlord. We have certain responsibilities under our lease to maintain the stadium and to manage our capital improvements. And so long-term stewardship of the building is part of our responsibility. We only have one team playing in the ballpark, but we do have single through AAA affiliates around the country. We also have an international academy located in the Dominican Republic. We provide all the legal support for the staff and the players there. We have our amateur operations, and so our minor league operations, a lot of those responsibilities flow to us. And then I think we have what I think of as like just the sundries, whether they're consulting agreements or vendor agreements or concession agreements. We host high school baseball tournaments, and so we have location agreements. We do have the concerts. We have other promotional events taking place at the stadium where people, they want to film music videos and things like that. So every day is absolutely different, but I think the one thing that is very consistent is that we're all looking for ways to ensure that the business thrives. We're all looking for opportunities to provide strategic advice and guidance that gives us that sort of advantage in the marketplace and gives us the opportunity to do with the platform that a professional sports team represents, to do good with that. And so I think one of the other things that is relatively underappreciated by folks who aren't looking at it very closely is we have a ton of community relationships and a ton of initiatives that are really focused on either giving back, developing or strengthening relationships, or serving the interests of those around us. I think one of the pillars of the Mariners mission that I love the most is our explicit commitment to serving our community. And that means we get to look outside the ballpark as well as focus on what we're doing inside and look for ways to be of service and to be of value. And we're trying to make sure that we're fostering healthy and safe communities while we're also offering this wonderful experience inside the ballpark and spreading the love of baseball.
I'm laughing because I literally told them the reason I sat here is so I didn't have to follow him. But I echo literally everything that the panelists have already said. Certainly that those are my roles as well. I think one value add that I have here, before Christian said that you have multiple teams, I didn't realize that. We also have the women's side. And as much as that looks like, oh, it could cross over fairly easy, it's two separate leagues, which means everything that we're doing is very much two separate approaches. And so we certainly have the double joint there. And then on the Sounders side, we also have our second team, that's our Tacoma Defiance. And then our academy team, we also have Rain Academy as well. But what that does is create a pipeline for homegrown players like Obed Vargas, who just moved on to Atletico. And it gives us an opportunity to really feed into what we call homegrown players that are from these spaces, from our communities. And when it comes to Tacoma Defiance players, those are technically employees of Seattle Soccer LLC. So I am having to not often negotiate those contracts because they are templated from the league, but we have loan agreements, transfer agreements, and we're having to oftentimes work with the league on those. Similar to what Marissa said, or maybe it was Haywan, we have someone on our technical side who's very equipped to negotiate those whenever needed, but certainly brings in legal when necessary. I echo also on Christian's point of the IP. I think, I was just on the call with League today about a design that we want to use on our scarf, conversations about music licenses for our kit launch and all the things that are already live. And oftentimes in the sports industry, very different from the technology industry, is that things are moving quick and sometimes legal is behind, but we are still moving it forward. So that's all that I have to add, the value that I have to add to this, but I think everything that they said matters, and it definitely is a variety of areas that we certainly practice in.
I think everybody have to agree. These sound like unbelievably fascinating jobs. And just because Seattle's a sports town now, and sports are driving so much in this city right now, opportunities are coming our way because of the fan support in the city. I'm envious of you guys for the jobs that you have, and I would have applied if I didn't have a lifetime appointment after mine. So I'll stick with my day job. Let me ask you something more pertinent to specific to Black History Month. Any experiences in your trajectory that were unique because of your race, or any specified challenges you encountered along your pathway? To give me some examples, I know when Robert Flanaugh and I did this panel, I think it was last year, and with some other folks and other celebrations, we've shared our own personal histories. So I don't want to have you have to divulge things which are personal or that were painful, because I know Robert and I have had some in our lifetime and experiences. But anything like that, I'm not going to go in particular order, that any one of you would like to share. Sadie?
I think the only, I don't equate a lot of the things that I made happen to being treated differently because of my race or because of my sexual orientation. But I will say, I graduated in 2020, and that was the height of the pandemic as we all know it, but also the BLM movement. And being from Oklahoma, you can imagine what that experience was for me. I felt like my Facebook, my timeline was very much divided. Every colleague and friend and peer that I met here in Seattle had one opinion, and then everyone that I ever grew up with had a second opinion. And that was an experience where I felt I really had to dive into what it meant for me and truly start to speak out. And so, I don't know to the extent that in this panel today, we'll get to the things that we're doing out in the community, but certainly for me, speaking out on Black lives and racial equity is absolutely an important part of my job and how I move throughout my day to day, whether that's I'm at a table with, executive levels and I'm bringing a perspective that maybe other people don't have because of how I grew up and the things that I'm used to. But I will say, I think the value I add to rooms because of my race is the perspective I bring, but also how I grew up. I have a lot of I'll give them a leeway. I'll say I have a lot of leeway for people that don't necessarily understand or have never experienced something different. But I only give them a couple of chances. And then once those couple of chances are over, then it's obviously not the leeway. It's not this the moment of time where they're trying to learn and come out of that ignorance. It's really about them just being stuck and truly believing what they believe. And so I love to sit at tables where people have different perspectives than me, because I can truly, push that boundary a little bit and see if they are truly that way because they've never experienced something different and no one has asked them or told them or called it out. But certainly if it's the other way around, then I leave it at that, and I make some notes.
So I think one through line for me in my career as a lawyer, and I think it actually reaches all the way back to law school, is, and I imagine some of you can actually, everyone can probably relate to this from a certain perspective or in a certain context, but being the only person like yourself in the room. And sometimes we feel that way, even though maybe our differences are invisible. But then when you really stick out, then it's kind of easy to, see who's the guy who doesn't really fit the mold here. I remember when I was in law school, looking around and just recognizing that there weren't a lot of people like me. I went to law school I had been living in Oakland, and so I was surrounded by a lot of folks who I felt like had a cultural foundation that I was a part of. Went to New York for law school, and New York, incredibly rich city, but once you get inside some of the sort of more exclusive spaces, you realize that the inclusive quotient shrinks, right? And same experience when I came out here to start practice at Perkins. I was not the only person. I was not the only person of color. I was not the only Black man at the firm, but I was one of a very few. And then that continued when I joined the faculty at Seattle University. People walk into the classroom and they never. I still remember people asking, like, where's the professor? And it was me. And that's okay. It tells you something about how people are reading the space. And so obviously that happens over and over, and it's this consistent experience, and you reflect on it and you learn from it. And one of the things that I think I was always aware of is that there's a certain responsibility there, right? When you are a little bit of a vanguard, you know that people are going to follow you. That's part of the point of showing up, is to maybe open the door a little bit more widely. But then there's that sense of responsibility to make sure that then when the next person shows up, they're received maybe a little bit more favorably, or with a less of a sense of surprise. And then I think it was also important when you're in these spaces and you have this opportunity to share who you are and share your perspective, as Sadie said, that you do speak up, and that you provide a glimpse from a different standpoint that helps enrich the conversation. And so, Judge Jones, you were talking about, or no, I think Tony, you were talking about, sitting on the sidelines, sitting in the stands. It's not okay to always take a pass on this sense of obligation to speak up, because sometimes you're the only person in the room who might be able to say what you know and what you've seen. And I think there's value in that. And then I think the other thing that really struck me as I reflected on these things and I learned about occupying these different spaces is that there are allies everywhere, and you never know what they're going to look like, and you never know what they're going to sound like. But it's kind of like, I think Mr. Rogers said, you got to find the helpers. There are helpers in every space, and when you can latch onto those folks and start to build strong relationships with them, that's the emergence of an alliance. And I think the alliance is certainly stronger than any one of us, and I've really benefited from being a part of those alliances over time.
I think there are a couple of points that you brought up that I could probably dovetail off of. When I started my career in New York, similarly, in real estate finance, I was the only person of color in my practice group, only female of color in my practice group. There were some female partners, but I was kind of far removed from being a junior associate. And so similarly, like what you spoke about in terms of finding allies and having to learn how to navigate situations and to find, similarities, and sometimes taking the onus to say, I am more like you than, not like you, with some of the associates that were there. I remember I personally don't drink beer. I know that's weird for Seattle, especially. I know it's a thing here with the hops, but I'm not a beer drinker. But that particular group, all the guys drink beer. They had this thing on Friday that they would have beer and pizza, and I would go and I would pretend to drink like beer, and I'd watch ESPN. Maybe this was like the start of the sports thing. Watch ESPN for all the highlights and just like repeat verbatim what I heard on ESPN just to show that I can hang out with the guys. And it was an experience for me. But again, it was me taking the onus, and not to say that that was fair or that's the way that it should have been, but to show that I am more like you than apart. Don't look at this my skin color or my sex and to assume that I can't one, do my job effectively, because I can. I'm there for a reason based on merit. And then two, that, again, we can't hang in the same rooms or have something to talk about. Eventually they caught on that I actually don't like beer. And then they started to put in cider in the box for me. So the first day, it was like a quiet, I'm just put something there and see what she picks up. And so the first day I looked in there and I was like, oh, that's so sweet. But, again, I'm around guys, so I can't really say that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like just picking it up and talking with the guys. But those experiences shape you, right? And as a junior associate, I didn't have a lot of autonomy over the the matters or the things that I can work on. But as I advanced in my career, there were opportunities, especially where I am now, where I looked at that. Like I wanted to see people that looked like me in positions. I wanted to make sure that there was a path for me specifically in the organization. And I'm happy to say at the Seahawks that there is. I report to an African-American male, a chief legal officer, and that is important to me to have seen at the highest ranks of our organization that there are people that look like me, and that there's a pathway for me. So, again, all of these experiences shape you in different ways. I've been in rooms where someone has asked, where's the lawyer? And I'm like, you mean the other lawyer? Because I'm right here. And so, again, you kind of learn from those experiences, but then, it helps shape you and grow. And it also has taught me how I don't want to treat people, right? I want to make sure that people feel welcome in rooms. I want to make sure that I treat, the janitor as well as I treat our club president, just because, again, everyone deserves and demands respect. And so I appreciate that question because it had me reflect on that.
And Marissa, personal question. Did you go to the Super Bowl?
Yes, I did.
All right.
I had a
And-
great
and-
time in San
and-
Francisco, specifically because the Seahawks logo was all over Levi Stadium, and as well as in their locker room and in their pro shop. And so, I mean, we now can just say Lumenfield of California. You know what I mean? Lumen South is great. Yes.
Anyone?
I mean, I don't have too much to add other than just because of the particular room that we're in to say that I think in addition to us at the Kraken having very intentionally started out and hired a very diverse team of executives, but staff all the way down the line. I take very seriously the responsibility as a lawyer to reflect why I'm in the room. I'm, there are lots of lawyers who could do my job, who could do our jobs, but not many who have had the experiences that we all have had, and who, I come from a family that argues a lot and sometimes say a little too much. And I work with a group of people who trust each other and who can speak very freely. Sometimes you get in those rooms, and even as a senior executive, it can be challenging to be the one who says the thing. You'd be surprised at everybody in that room can start to become a little bit of an echo chamber because you know how different people will react after you've worked with them for 5 or 6 years. Like, well, I'm not going to say this because I know that person already has this position, but you have to keep trying. Your team is coming to you as a lawyer for advice and counsel, and they want to know what is permissible and also what's advisable. And I take that charge very seriously as general counsel to to give them what I think, an opinion that's what I think we should do and who we as an organization want to be.
Can you imagine that somebody said, well, who's your client? Seahawks. Who's your client, man? Sounders, Kraken. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Okay, let's transition now a little bit more hot button issues.
Mm.
We've heard and seen things in the paper about ICE arrests at stadiums, at facilities, trying to intimidate people and going to the games. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not expressing an opinion one way or the other. But I'm just curious as to whether or not there's any concern or impact that these issues have affected any of the teams, the games, or operations.
I mean, there's daily concern or communications on the issue. Everything from staff. So we had a Cardi B show on Sunday, and she, in her first show of this tour, made some comment about if ICE shows up. I mean, her crowd is obviously very heavily brown and black. If ICE shows up at my shows, we're going to jump them. It's like, I would love if you wouldn't say that 2 days before your show in Seattle, right? And so, obviously, since the significant enforcement actions have picked up, we've started making sure that our team is trained on our protocol, that our protocol makes sense for how we actually operate, that it's communicated to the staff. But we just don't know what we're going to see. We don't know if it's going to be significant enforcement actions at arenas and stadiums. We don't know if it'll be targeted. ICE can show up in a lot of ways, and it's really just about, from our perspective, preparing for if and when these things start happening in Seattle, whether that's in the arena or on the Seattle Center campus, or things happening to our staff outside of the facility. We've got 2,000-ish full and part-time employees. So that's a lot of people who either personally or their families could be affected. Just having a conversation open so people don't panic or feel overwhelmed when the time comes. But we, thankfully, knock on wood, haven't had any major issues yet.
Have any input?
Similarly, we have not. We did have at one of our events, I believe that there was someone walking around with a jacket, and then that caused a little bit of panic as to whether or not they were at the facility. But again, with proper training, communication, we were able to identify that that person was not a part of any ICE operation at that particular time. However, again, we're hosting FIFA World Cup, which is a big international event. We have been in constant communication with FIFA and with, again, all of the, different law enforcement agencies to ensure that we have a plan in place in the event that does occur. We're hoping that we do not see that. There's also communication. I think it also talks about the collaboration of venues, of ensuring that, we are also all on one accord in terms of what may go on at CPA, because we have folks that work at multiple venues. So sometimes we share support staff or, part-time staff or services like allied or security vendor. And so we just want to make sure that, whatever communication is being given out at our venue is consistent across the other venues. And I appreciate the help of both Christian and Haywan in terms of ensuring that, again, giving visibility into some of the practices that they have, and then to be able to help develop ours as well at Lumen.
Yeah, very similar approach, very similar reality. I think what we're all ultimately trying to do and are committed to is keeping our people safe, and our people really mean that as broadly as possible. It's our staff, it's our players, it's our fans, it's our friends just out in the community who are enjoying the atmosphere around the stadium without necessarily coming in. I think it's another really great example of what Haywan said earlier. We want to be looking around the corner, right? Take a long view and be prepared for things before an issue or an event arises. And we also, I think in baseball in particular, I mean, we have a very high representation of Latin American and Caribbean and native Spanish speaking players, coaching and sporting staff, as well as non-baseball personnel. Um, and so one of the things that we did in addition to just facilities readiness and developing procedures is we want to make sure everybody understood what their rights were, if there were an interaction with an agency official, um, and they understand how to protect themselves under the circumstances so that if there is an encounter, at least we can try to minimize the possibility of true harm.
Yeah, we are humans first, and that is what I lead with every day in my philosophy. When I walk into the doors, it doesn't matter what I'm advising on. We are humans first, and every human has constitutional rights. And so, to echo Christian's remarks, to me, that was our organization's first priority, and should be our organization's first priority, is to at least identify for our client that everyone has constitutional rights, and preparing them with that information is enough to make them feel comfortable in spaces when they might not feel comfortable. Even if they are not a person of color, I think Christian mentioned this earlier too, the community impact that our organization, both Sounders and Rain, live in is about racial equity. It is about the right to play. It is about LGBTQ rights. It is about our planet, and protecting the earth. And at the end of the day, all the things that we do ladder into our social justice framework. So for me, it truly is about that being the prime purpose, the prime priority. I would also say, we Sounders and Rain are a bit different from those on the panelists, or at least the teams that are being represented here, because we do not have our own stadium. And so, to the extent that we can prepare our clients, it usually is around our facilities, whether that be our clubhouse or Starfire, where the Rain trains. But certainly working in tangent with Marissa and those folks at Lumen Field, so that when we are playing matches in that stadium, we're prepared if anything happens. And so it is one of those things where I feel like lack of process is going to create a lot of chaos. And so you're just trying to prepare for the worst and hoping for the best. But certainly putting people in positions where they feel empowered to make the right decision. And oftentimes giving them the contact information, because that was enough for me just to be like, tell them who to call if they're in a situation.
Let's flip to a totally different area. I don't know about you, but every time I turn a newspaper or turn a page newspaper or listen to the news, AI is driving everything. Does AI affect how you perform your job, or how you do your job, or have you had to interact with AI, and to what degree?
How many emails a day do you all get from AI pitch companies?
Yeah, and I use AI to process those. So maybe
yeah, go
I'll start because I'm actually very excited about this. Having a little bit of a technology transaction background, I've been really keen to see what's happening with the development of AI in legal tech, as well as more broadly. I mean, everyone's got AI in their pocket right now, so it's here. So I think it is naturally, even if invisibly, affecting our work in these kind of small efficiencies that you might get, or maybe you started using Copilot or Gemini that's baked into your Office suite. We are actually exploring the adoption of looking at several candidates for adoption for some AI-enabled contract lifecycle management platforms. And I think it actually is going to change the way we do our work. And what it won't do is displace the lawyer. But what I think it will do is give the lawyer some particularly sharp and efficient tools to use in his or her job. And I think, just looking ahead, it's probably good professional strategy to get comfortable with AI and figure out how you can use it to serve your clients more effectively and more efficiently. On the lawyering side, separate from the tools that we might be using, one of the things that I think has been really fascinating and has presented a challenge, I think, in a lot of industries and certainly in baseball, is AI is an incredible creative tool. And if you are in a creative department, you might be either inclined or almost compelled to use AI systems to generate new work. One of the things we've had to do is provide some really clear guidance about the ambiguity of ownership around those creative assets if AI is part of your development process. And so we've developed some internal guidelines and policies that advise on safe and appropriate and prudent AI use practices, and provide some guardrails around some things that we think are not yet safe or secure enough to allow it to enter into like our normal workflow. So experimentation, testing, familiarity, that's all good. But if we're talking about creating club assets, working with club assets, ingesting or manipulating club data, that's where we are urging a lot of caution. So it's making its way in, but we're also trying to keep some boundaries in place while we figure out exactly how this can be implemented more fully, if that is in fact where we're going.
I'm a little more conservative, I think, in how I personally approach AI, particularly as it relates to the legal practice. Our work with the Kraken and the arena is not so repeatable. We don't have very many form contracts, and we don't have a lot of work that's really conducive to using AI to facilitate. But where I am excited to see the applications of AI is on the business side, like you were saying. And in particular, our business intelligence team, data analytics team, has come up with a number of pilot projects. Sort of what you don't want with any technology, whether it's AI or anything else, is you make a big swing, you invest a ton of time in these implementation processes that are enormously resource intensive to get up and running. And then it flops, and then a year later you're doing the same thing with either the technology you had in the first place or with whatever is supposedly the next big thing, and you're not actually making these grand gains. There's a lot of hype behind it, and as the lawyer, you see that because you see what goes into the contract and then what comes out on the other end. So I think what we've been doing, Amazon is a close partner of ours, our naming rights partner, and AWS has been investing a lot in AI along with their partners. And our data analytics team has done an incredible job of coming up with really narrow and well-defined ways that we can apply AI, and making sure that those are areas where we can also measure the outcomes as easily as possible. It's a little hard on the legal side of things. As many pitch emails as I get about how this is going to save time and energy, and all your risk management needs will be handled. It's hard to quantify because right now the proofreading that it requires is incredibly time intensive, and I'm not sure how a lot of these companies are valuing my time. I don't bill hourly, but it's the technology as I've seen it is not yet there for legal work, which, for better or worse, we're going to remain employed for a little bit longer. But I think it's important to facilitate the work that our colleagues do and help them experiment with using AI with the appropriate guardrails, like Christian said.
I think for us, the guardrails were very vitally important because we have a lot of creatives. Our digital media team, they, see this new software and they just want to immediately start utilizing it because, it's going to create some great piece that is going to get 1 million views on YouTube or on Instagram. And so in conjunction with the league, set out some guidelines in regards to the use of AI. They now have a whole process by which before you can use any software that has an AI component, it has to be vetted by the league as well as vetted by our IT, BSA, and legal groups to make sure that we have the appropriate guardrails, the DPA, if we're going to put in any PII into I'm saying a lot of acronyms and hopefully everybody knows what those mean, into the platform, and just ensuring that we know exactly what everyone is utilizing. Because again, things move really fast in our world. A lot of times they may see, I love all of my teammates, but sometimes they see another group and they're like, oh, the Broncos just did XYZ and now we're going to do that. I'm like, hold on a second. I don't even know what this software is. I don't know who's holding it. Where is it being processed? How are they going to use our marks? Who owns it at the end of the day? Like, we need to slow down and make sure that we have control over our IP. As Christian said, our IP is very, very valuable, and we want to ensure that we know who's utilizing it appropriately, or not utilizing it in ways that we don't approve of. And so that has just been something that, again, we tried to take as conservative approach in the beginning, but we realized that our business units are going to use it, and they want to use AI. They're excited about the new software. And so it was up to us to make sure that we just put those guardrails in place to say, okay, you can use AI in these particular ways with these safety mechanisms around putting our data, our IP into these platforms. So we've been okay.
Yeah,
so
the
that's
comparison
fun.
to other teams is always interesting because
Oh
you
my
have
gosh.
no idea what it's I'm sure universal that, well, and it could be one of the teams here locally, which it's great to be friends with the other team GCs, but comparisons to teams in other cities, in other leagues, just doesn't work. Because for one thing, we have very different ownership structures and objectives, and also different league rules. So this is a conversation we have all the time where it's, well, they're using this at such and such team. Why don't we try it here? It's like, okay, well, let's pick up the phone and call that team's lawyer and see how they're using it and what are the real, where's the rub?
I feel like now we've just kind of put ourselves on the forefront that they don't know how close we are. It's going to let them know, because we get a lot of calls and it's like, hey, such and doing that. And I'm like, oh, really? That's so interesting. And I'm like, hey, Juan, what is your business?
They don't know
unit
about the
doing?
Sports
Exactly.
Lawyers Association conferences where we all
Exactly.
exchange
So,
information.
Yeah, but a lot of commonalities.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, my technology background is very much innovative. As much innovation as possible, the better. It also helps that our ownership group our owner is very deep dive into AI as much as you possibly can. And so we certainly have the guardrails around it as well. I will say the technology side of me as well is the slow your roll. Let me see that agreement. And I'm actually it's SaaS providers that have these terms that are outrageously one-sided and then don't really open the door to negotiations. But if we're going to use them, we're absolutely going to make sure that it's aligned for both parties. And that's how I look at it. But yeah, innovation is at our door regardless of how you see it.
Well, often we wait until the very end to say thank you to people. I'm going to say thank you to Tony. Tony's our IT person. Tony's in the back. Tony's always there. He's rock solid. We can always count on Tony. So thank you, Tony. Always, always, always. Forget that clock. That's not what we're going by. We're going by my watch. And so it's only 10 after 4, so you got a little bit more time. One of the questions that somebody asked, and I'm not going to wait until the end because I think it's important. There's a good percentage of people here who are on the younger side. They're still, in the job hunt, in the job chase. And the question was, how can young lawyers with litigation background do to position themselves for in-house counsel positions? I think that's always good. You talked about your backgrounds, and that's why I asked that at the beginning. So if people are checking out the roadmap to say, well, what do I have to see compared to what they have to see if I'd be qualified for a position like that? Any thoughts, recommendations, or suggestions of what people can do to prepare themselves other than working hard? And for the law clerks and just killing it when you're working for the judges, what can you share with us?
Well, I know that I want all of my agreements to be litigation proof. So if you have a litigation background, I would, a lot of the work that we do is on the transactional side. I've never been in a courtroom. I've tried to avoid it my entire life. That is not something that I do. Obviously, we'll hire outside counsel to help on litigation matters, but I think that there's a lot of transferable skills that you learn being a litigator. And again, you're reviewing, there's due diligence that you're doing, and all of those transferable skills can relate to, if you come in on the in-house side at a sports team, where now you're drafting contracts and you know where the pitfalls to look at, the things that you would pull out for a litigation, a litigation matter. Now you want to make sure that the provisions are drafted in a way that, that won't be a pitfall if it was to, go that route. And so I think that, again, legal analysis is always going to be something that is going to be important. Your communication, the judges that you work for, and as a law clerk, those are similar to a partner that you would work for in a law firm. And so understanding the different personalities, the different ways that you can communicate information, understanding the business terms to the extent that you work on those type of litigation matters will be important. But I think there's so many transferable skills that you can bring from that perspective in-house that will make you invaluable. But a lot of times I get questions about, from law students or folks that want to kind of switch into an in-house role. And I think you just, at the basis level, it's following your passion. I was a real estate attorney, and now I'm a GC of a sports team. And that's not normally a traditional path, but I followed my passion of enjoying real estate work, the tangibility of it. And that has led me to now my current role. And so your passion, whatever it is about the law that you like, hold on to that, become, really do a deep dive and be knowledgeable about that, hone your skills, your interpersonal communication skills, your contract drafting skills to the point that you have, or just your legal writing and analysis. And again, those will serve you well as you continue your career.
I might add, I totally agree with what Marissa has said. I think one of the key skills that you can start to practice now, I mean, there are so many things that are transferable, but one of the key skills that I think you could develop even before the transition is made is your ability to learn the business, to really understand the business culture, the business model or footprint, and understand, I mean, you got to understand where the money how the money comes in and where it goes. You want to be able to walk into a business, get a really clear sense of what the strategic sort of direction or orientation of that business is. And you want to be able to figure out where the risks are and identify those in ways that make them amenable to mitigating that risk. And then I think the other thing that, so I had a litigation background, in my early career, and you always know what your client needs, right? They need to win that fight. And that's great, right? Because you have a really clear objective. But I think once you're in-house, your ability to be solution-minded is going to be at a premium. And I think that requires, critical thought and a lot of problem solving, and a fair amount of creativity sometimes, because often there isn't a clear roadmap until you write it.
I never practiced litigation, but I think one thing that I could add for those folks who are looking to transition into a new space, it came up for me in law school because I really was the most open-minded law student you would ever meet. Whenever there was an opportunity, I said yes. I raised my hand and I took it, which meant I did, I externed with the Seattle City Attorney's Office for civil litigation. I was a Rule 9 with the KCBA office. I did a little bit of everything and also transactional work. But oftentimes when it came to interviews, it was, you're doing a lot. How do we know that this is what you want to do and that you're interested in this space? Because girl, I did everything else. I didn't like it. So now I'm over here because I really like this space. And I really think that it's how you market it, because you have all these skills that you've learned in these different roles. I think for me, my litigation skills were there 100%. I'm very direct. I can talk to a jury. I'm very relatable. But it was the space that litigation I had to be in if I wanted to do a lot of that, and it was just not for me. And so I think those direct relatability skills that I was able to take away from litigation and working or, talking to a jury, easy transferable skills back as, client facing work and transactions specifically in-house.
The only other thing I will add is also if you want to continue your litigation path, you may want to look more to the league job. So working with the NFL, you tend to see more litigators than you will on the team side. Team side tends to be more transactional because a lot of usually if someone's doing one team, they're throwing all 32 and then the NFL takes over for that from our league. I don't know if it's similar in yours.
Let me ask you a question. There's been a lot of pushback about DEI and DEI initiatives from Black History Month. There may be some criticism to say, well, that fits in the area we're not supposed to be doing. Has there been any pushback, or what's the team approach to dealing with DEI initiatives or team commitments to DEI initiatives? I know players are all over the place in terms of being committed to the community. I'm on the One Roof Foundation, which is a nonprofit side for the Kraken, as board chair. Not putting in a plug for Kraken, but hey, they're doing it as every team is doing it. Just general thoughts about your teams and DEI initiatives. Has the landscape changed for you? Thoughts?
Yes and no.
Okay, well, let's get the yes ones first.
Yeah, yes, in the sense that obviously enforcement has changed and the environment around us has changed, and this administration has made DEI a bad word. And there are a lot of companies and businesses where local and across the country who have either decided to or been forced to pull back from DEI initiatives. I say no because we took a look at our DEI initiatives. We have the luxury of having been founded in the last 10 years, right? 2017, we started to go up for the expansion and we opened the arena in 2021. So we built our team. The sport of hockey is not at all traditionally diverse. And we intentionally built our team, our front office team, to reflect the Seattle community in terms of what we look like, and to have our foundation, of which Judge Jones is co-chair, focus on issues that matter to our community and giving access to the sport of hockey to people who come from underrepresented backgrounds is one of our 3 pillars. So it would be nearly impossible to retreat from that unless we were going to change the entire mission of our 501c3 nonprofit. So we did take a look at our public statements, how we position ourselves online. Are there programs that we want to maybe be less public or high profile about, just so as not to attract bad attention? But fundamentally, I'm very grateful and proud of our leadership team that we did go through that exercise and say, no, this is who we are. And whether you use the term DEI, which isn't necessary, what matters is the actions that you take. And we really have continued to live those commitments. I mean, you can feel free to add on to this, Judge Jones, because I know those conversations happened at the foundation as well as on the business side of things. It is not an easy decision to make, truly, because these are supposed to be business driven decisions. DEI is both what we want to be and also what we think is best for the business. And so as long as you can credibly, with a straight face, make that case to your leadership team, I think it's very easy to stay committed. And we're fortunate to be in Seattle, obviously, from this perspective.
How about the modern challenges of regulatory compliance? How difficult does that make your jobs? And not that you can disclose any specific issues that you're having or challenges about regulatory compliance, but any thoughts on how you handle that and your approach to dealing with regulatory compliance, and how does that fit in the overall scheme of prioritizing that?
For us, and a lot of times in sports, you move so quickly, and we've said that a lot of times on this panel, but the growth often happens so quickly too. And particularly in soccer right now, I mean, our growth is our employees, particularly those who have only worked for the club or have been with the club for the last 10 or 14 years. It is truly, it's impressive to see how they've operated so long with doing the same things and then being like, whoa, we gotta pull that back. So regulatory compliance, I think from my perspective and what I often see coming through my pipeline is consumer protection. I mean, and coming from tech, that was the first thing that you build out whenever you're creating a new product or technology, is you're making sure that all of the consumer protection efforts are included and making sure that you're in compliance with laws. Whereas sports industry, you're often using third-party vendors or SaaS providers. So oftentimes they're creating it, and then we have to look at it from our lens and how we're using it and making sure that it's going to meet the needs that we need to be in compliance with regulatory laws. But I will say, I think oftentimes too, you know, the growth is great, but getting more eyes means getting more, not just regulatory eyes and like elected officials looking at us, but it's also our fans being like, what y'all, what are you doing? I need to purchase a ticket and it's not made available for me. And we have to start looking at our, you know, our third party ticket providers and talking to them. But oftentimes we are the middleman in that because they are a third party provider. So for us, I think it's the growth has made it very challenging, but at the same time, with growth means we're actually growing our teams internally too. And that gives us an opportunity to level set and have those trainings so people know exactly what to be looking for.
I think one thing I would add is that when it comes to regulatory compliance, prevention is really key. You know, preventing issues from arising in the first place. I think I'm going to guess for all of us, but certainly at the Mariners organization, we think there's a lot of value in robust policies and procedures so that we can be proactive in our compliance efforts. And that also allows us to be ready to demonstrate our compliance without a huge resource commitment and in short time frames. But regulatory compliance is regulatory compliance. If you're a lawyer, you're probably somewhat familiar with that. And to a certain extent, it's the same all over the place. One of the things I think is unique about sports is that all of our organizations are members of leagues, and those leagues are very powerful regulators. So in addition to everything else that we deal with, whether it's employment or consumer protection or public health and safety or alcohol operations at the facilities, dealing with our league compliance obligations is chief among those responsibilities. Use the same approach in terms of policies and procedures, but when you're dealing with the league actually holds all of the power. I mean, it's like a mini government in itself with all of the powers of the three branches rolled into one. So you can imagine how important it is to stay on the right side of those lines.
I don't really have too much to add. That is true. It's like a dictatorship. It is the league. We listen to the league. They do a lot of vetting for a lot of the issues that probably will roll down, and then mainly want to make sure that, you know, from a state level, that we're also not butting against anything that would, you know, open us up to any type of risk. But a lot of the times, by the time the league rolls down something, they've kind of vetted it for all of the areas that the other teams are located in. So we tend to be good on that front. And then having policies, as you said, policies and procedures in place to ensure that we are always following the rules and regulations. It's key.
Okay, now I've been poking around a lot of different areas, and we just have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything that when you walked in the door today that I didn't ask you, or you wanted to make sure before you walk out the door, you had a chance to pass that message on to everybody else? Anything burning that you'd like to share with the audience? That wasn't on the
Loaded
question.
question. Yeah, I think that's a loaded question.
Well, I'll take the pressure.
Okay.
Christian, do you have something?
Well, if you have something specific you want to raise, I think the one question that was that we talked about during our planning session that I spent the most time thinking about is who were your mentors?
Mm,
Um,
That's a good one.
and I was really excited to answer that question because it was, the planning conversation reminded me of how important those people were in my lives and have been ever since. And I had a list in my head and I was going to, give little vignettes about each person. And it maybe is less important to name them, although some of you may know some of those mentors who helped me grow as a lawyer. But I think it's just, it was a really nice opportunity for me to reflect on what I'm grateful for, and to think about all the ways in which I could not have done any number of the things that I think of as some of my most cherished accomplishments if it weren't for the support that other people provided to me, the advice that I got in key moments, the grace that people were willing to give me when I made mistakes, and the fundamental lesson that they taught me that making those mistakes is really the key to your progress, and providing me a space where those mistakes weren't really going to bring the house down. So that's the one thing that I wanted to be able to leave here today having said is that I'm very grateful to those people. And then for those of you who are still in the early part of your career, seek those folks out. I think that we have such a wonderful legal practice community here. There are lawyers of incredible talent and experience who are just waiting to pay that back and to share with you what they have to offer. And I think you should give yourself permission to ask for it and receive it when it is offered.
If I may add on to that, mentorship is extremely important to me. And I was saying this earlier before the panel started, but mentorship can mean whatever you want it to mean. And oftentimes, I mean, when I was reflecting on that question, I have 50 people that I could thank for me being in the position that I'm in today. And then often is because I look at mentorship as someone has something to offer me. The conversation that we have, I'm able to take everything that they say, decide what makes sense for me, what I can relate to, and leave the rest, and then go find mentorship through other people that can provide and fill the gaps where that person necessarily I didn't relate to them, or that was not something that I felt like would help me create my craft. And so I think it's very important. Mentorship is not transactional. It's very much a relationship that you thank them over and over again. And honestly, the person that gave me my opportunity at Zillow was through an OCI interview and then brought me back during the pandemic when, real estate boomed. I thank her every opportunity that I get because she made a position for me at Zillow, which a lot of people didn't know was even a thing. But I give my gratitude to her. And then there's also another mentor that I'm sure most of you are very aware of, our Seattle City Attorney, Erica Evans. Absolutely took me under her wing when I was in law school. So I would just like to thank those people every single time. But obviously, these two people have very different backgrounds, very different scopes in their work and what they do today, and different from what I do. But I learned so much from them because there were things that I related to that I was able to take away.
To add on to that, I know that, and we talk a lot about mentorship, but I've also been grateful across my career to have really good sponsors for me that are a little bit different than what I look at for my mentors. So sponsors are folks that have decided that they see something in me and that they will speak and put my names in a room that I am not in at that moment. And so if you have the opportunity to be a sponsor for someone, again, this may not be the person that you're going to tell talk to all of the time, but they see something in you, and that they are, ensuring that you have the ability for your voice or for your name to be heard in those rooms until you can get in there yourselves. Do that for people, and again, that also is valuable for people's career. It's been invaluable for mine. My sponsor, who also kind of switches back and forth as my mentor as well. Ed going to, I don't have a lot of time to, I don't have enough time to be able to talk about how grateful I am for him, not only as a boss, but again, as a sponsor, as a mentor, has again switched roles in terms of there are times where he has to walk me through to say, okay, hey, Marissa, this is an appropriate path. This is what I think you should do. And then there's times where he has spoken my name in rooms, that he has praised me in areas and not even told me about it. And someone could come up to me and say, hey, Ed was talking to me about you, or you just worked on this project. And I'm appreciative that Ed gave you your flowers for the work that you did, and how that has been invaluable for my career, and something that I take and make sure that, again, I may not have this immense amount of time to mentor everyone, but there are times where people are watching you, for the younger attorneys or people that are on the pathway up, that there are people that are watching you that will say, okay, I may not be able to tell you, but if someone asks me about, Sadie Houston, I will say she's a phenomenal lawyer. I've worked with her on deals. That may not be something that me and Sadie talk about all of the time, but I will make sure that her name is spoken into the rooms, and until she gets there to be able to speak for herself. So again, we have a lot of seasoned attorneys in the room, and I feel like, again, sometimes we don't have the ability or the time to mentor, but let's not forget that sponsorship is equally important.
I would just add, a similar note, which is that Seattle is a really small town, and everybody's just a couple degrees away from each other, and you'd be surprised at how far and wide your work can resonate. I've definitely worked with or hired or brought on as outside counsel people who I would have had no reason to interact with, but for the reason that someone who I trust recommended them. So I think that has served me well, of reminding myself constantly that you will cross paths with people in this town, and in sports is a really small industry and a lot of overlapping people and companies and opportunities to work together. So I think the value that I have found most useful is just being really good at what you do and a good person. And those two things will carry you very far if the right person is speaking for you.
In closing out, mentorship is a perfect way to close this session. We talk more in terms of the mentee-driven communication. What I want to focus on before you walk out this door is the opportunity for you as a mentor to reach out and go and lift up somebody who might not otherwise get that chance. Doesn't have to be somebody you know, doesn't have to be somebody in your firm, and maybe somebody that you meet downstairs or just in casual conversation. But there's a lot of folks that might not get the opportunity otherwise to talk to somebody of your stature. And for the younger people, when you do have contact with somebody that you want to be a mentor or have conversation with, please don't come up and say, Judge Jones, you have time for lunch or dinner? No. You got a better shot if you say, Judge Jones, can I have 5 minutes of your time? The 5 minutes of your time works like gold, because lawyers will give you 5 minutes of their time. They'll stop usually what they're doing and take the time. And invariably, that 5 minutes will turn into the best conversation you had of your career. You just never know. With that, I'd like to welcome all of you downstairs to a reception that we're going to have, and to thank again this absolutely wonderful panel that we had today. No, I think they deserve a standing ovation. So everybody get off your butts.
Oh, we don't have to have a standing
All
ovation.
right. Thank you.